In the frozen rubble of the Eastern Front, over 300,000 Axis soldiers starved, froze, and bled to death. Yet the men who perished in history's deadliest battle were not ultimately doomed by the Soviet winter or the Red Army. They were condemned by their own supreme commander. To understand how this happened, we have to rewind to the summer of 1942. The German military launched an offensive called Case Blue. The actual strategic objective was to capture the oil fields of the Caucasus to fuel the German war effort. But Adolf Hitler became obsessed with a secondary target on the map, a heavily industrialized city. On the Volga River, he diverted the massive Sixth Army to take it simply because the city bore the name of his rival, Joseph Stalin. Entering Stalingrad forced the Vermont to abandon the mobile mechanized tactics of the Blitzkrieg. The heavy Luftwaffe bombing had reduced the city to a maze of shattered concrete and twisted steel. Tanks could not maneuver here. German soldiers were dragged into a grinding room-by-room bloodbath that they began calling Rotten Creek the Rat War. By trading their greatest tactical advantage for an ideological prize, the German high command anchored their most powerful field army in a static, predictable location, while the Germans bled themselves dry trying to capture city blocks. The Soviets were quietly massing forces on the edges of the battlefield. The Soviet high command recognized a glaring weakness because Hitler poured Packery available German unit directly into the city. The flanks outside Stalingrad were guarded by Romanian, Hungarian, and Italian troops who lacked the anti-tank weapons needed to hold the line. This map of the Volga region illustrates exactly how the Soviets exploited that vulnerability. In mid-November, they launched Operation Uranus. Instead of fighting in the urban center, two massive Soviet forces pierced through the weakly held Axis flanks to the north and south of the city, driving deep into the rear. Within days, the two pincers met at the town of Kalash. The trap slammed shut. The entire German Sixth Army was instantly severed from its supply lines. Locked inside a pocket of land they called Dark Kessel the Cauldron in the immediate aftermath of the encirclement. The Soviet ring was still thin and disorganized for approximately 24 hours. The Sixth Army had a fleeting window of opportunity. If they concentrated their armor and attacked westward, they possessed the physical capability to break out and reconnect with the German lines the Soviet military had successfully isolated. 250,000 enemy troops. They engineered a trap that stripped the Vermont of its momentum and neutralized its deadliest field army in a matter of days. Inside the cauldron, General Friedrich Paulus knew exactly how precarious his situation was. Recognizing the narrow window for escape, he immediately began drawing up plans to pull his men out of the city, rebel, turn his tanks around, and smash through the encircling Soviet forces. But over 1,000 miles away, at the Wolf Slayer in East Prussia, Adolf Hitler flew into a rage. He refused to yield a single inch of the city that carried Stalin's name completely. Attached from the tactical reality on the ground, on November 24th, Hitler issued the Helltaube Field the no-retreat order. He declared the trap pocket to be a fortress and strictly forbade police from attempting a breakout. The Sixth Army was ordered to dig in and hold their positions at all costs. To justify leaving an entire army stranded, Hitler relied on a promise from his Air Force chief, Hermann Göring. Without consulting his own logistics staff, Göring confidently assured Hitler that the Luftwaffe could supply the encircled Sixth Army entirely by air. On that day, military logic was officially discarded. The survival of 300,000 men was staked entirely on a logistical fiction. This chart outlines the brutal mathematics of the promised airlift. To survive and maintain operations, the Sixth Army required an absolute minimum of 750 tons of supplies every single day. The Luftwaffe rarely managed to deliver even 100 tons. Even worse, the cargo that did arrive was completely mismanaged. Transport planes risked heavy Soviet anti-aircraft fire, only to land in the snow and unload boxes of black pepper and thousands of condoms. Meanwhile, tanks sat immobilized without fuel and infantrymen ran out of bullets. An external German relief force code, named Operation Winterstorm, tried to punch through to the pocket, but was beaten back by the Red Army. By late December, the temperature on the steppe plunged to -30 degrees Celsius. Inside the cauldron, the conditions became horrific. Soldiers still wearing their summer uniforms froze to death in their trenches. Dysentery and typhus swept the ranks. Wounded men lay in ruined cellars without bandages or painkillers, while the starving survivors were reduced to boiling shoe leather and slaughtering draft horses for meat. The German High Command discovered that propaganda cannot feed an army. By January, the Sixth Army had been carved out and frozen through. They were mathematically and biologically dead. By the end of January 1943, the pocket had been split in two, and the Soviet forces were clearing the final basements. In a deeply cynical maneuver, Hitler sent a radio message promoting Paulus to the rank of Field Marshal in the history of the German military. No field marshal had ever been captured alive. The promotion was a direct instruction to commit suicide. Paulus refused to shoot himself for a commander who had abandoned him. On January 31st, dirty, exhausted, and suffering from dysentery, the newly minted field marshal surrendered his forces from the basement of a wrecked department store. Approximately 91,000 Axis troops survived the battle long enough to stumble out of the rubble with their hands raised. Weakened by starvation and disease, they were marched across the freezing steppe into Soviet labor camps. Only 5,000 of them would ever see Germany again when the German state radio replaced its regular programming with somber classical music to announce the defeat. A shockwave rippled across the home front. After years of rapid conquests, the German public absorbed the sheer scale of the disaster and realized their military was vulnerable. By prioritizing his own pride over military logistics, on November 24th, Adolf Hitler destroyed his own elite fighting force. The defeat at Stalingrad handed the strategic initiative permanently to the Red Army, triggering a long, brutal retreat that would not stop until Soviet troops reached the streets of Berlin.